This video will show you how to replace the front brakes, pads and rotors on a Ford Edge. These will be located behind your front wheels. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've completed that, we're going to remove our center cover. For this, I'm just using a small pry bar. I'm finding the groove in the rim, and I should be able to make my way in and gently pry. Once you have that removed, go ahead and set it aside and we'll start removing our lug nuts. We're using a 19mm for each of these lug nuts so we can remove the wheel. We have a clear view of our front brake rotors and our brake pads located inside of the caliper. The next thing I like to do is use a small pry bar. I'm going to make my way into these grooves in the caliper itself, and I'm going to attempt to pry up against my brake rotor, pulling the caliper outward. That's going to press in on each one of our two caliper pistons. Now, once you do feel as though you have movement from this, we're going to continue on along the backside for our two caliper slider bolts. Continuing with each one of our two caliper slider pins, we're going to start by using a 17mm. I'm going to fully remove my first caliper slider pin. We'll give it a quick inspection, and then I like to slide it right back in. After that, I'll continue on to the second slider pin. This will help prevent the caliper from falling down as we continue on. Now, as we start removing these two caliper slider pins, you're going to find that one of them is a little bit longer than the other. Let's make sure that we do not mix these up. They need to go into the same orientation. Now we can take hold of that caliper. We're going to carefully lift it up and away from our brake pads. Now we can pay attention to our caliper pistons themselves. What we need to see is that they're both pushed in as far as they can be, and there's no fluid coming from around the dust boots. If you see any damage or fluid, the caliper needs to be replaced. Let's hang this aside, putting no pressure on our flex hose. With the caliper out of the way, we'll continue on to our two brake pads. We have the inner brake pad and the outer brake pad. We'll continue on to our two caliper bracket mounting bolts next. For these bolts, we'll be using a 19mm. I'm going to start with the top bolt, a quick inspection, and start it back in just as I did before, and we'll continue on to the second mounting bolt. A thorough inspection of each piece of hardware and our caliper bracket. We're going to be cleaning up the caliper bracket and relubricating, but for now, let's set it aside. Now, when we go to remove the brake rotor, you may find that it's stuck in place. This is common. If that is the case, take one of your original lug nuts and start it back on a couple threads. This is going to prevent the rotor from falling off while we continue on. I'm going to be using a hammer, and since I'm replacing the rotor, I can tap anywhere on the rotor braking surface here. This is going to help break it free. There we are. Now, prior to installation of any brand new part, let's clean and inspect the mounting area. So we need to make sure we remove any miscellaneous debris, otherwise you may have a brake pulsation. We'll use some parts cleaner, and you can use a wire brush as necessary. One thing I would note about cleaning the hub mating surface, while you're doing this, it couldn't hurt to make your way along the back side of the hub mating surface just in case there's any miscellaneous rust. When it comes to pushing back your caliper pistons, you need to make sure you press them both in at the same time. If you were to press in on one, you're going to find the other one will want to make its way out, and that can cause damage. Now, if you have a specialty tool, you can use that. This will compress both pistons at the same time. Of course, a thorough inspection, as I mentioned before, to confirm there's no damage or fluid. After completing that, we're going to continue on with high temperature caliper lubricant. We're going to lubricate each one of our 2 caliper pistons, and then we're going to make our way along the back side of each of our outer ears. After completing this, we can hang this aside, once again putting no pressure on our flex hose. Down in this area, we'll continue on with some copper anti-seize on the mating surface of our wheel bearing hub. Now let's clean our brand new brake rotor. The areas that we need to focus is along the front and the rear braking surfaces. We'll use some parts cleaner and a clean rag. Go ahead and give it a quick wipe, and then we'll continue on with our installation. Once you have your brake rotor in place, continue on with one of your original lug nuts. We're going to bottom this out. This will hold the brake rotor for us so it does not fall off while we continue on. Now it's time to clean and prepare our caliper bracket. For this, you're going to have to remove your original caliper bracket tins, and then we're going to have to clean inside of each one of our 2 caliper slider ports. Let's start with the tins. For this, I'm just going to go ahead and pry them out of place. Okay, we've got all those off of there. Now the next thing you would want to do is clean the areas where those bracket tins were located. For this, I'm going to use a wire brush. If you did find that you have any large debris that needs to be removed, you can use a flathead screwdriver or you can use a small pry bar to try to remove as much as possible. Now that we've cleaned our caliper bracket, we're moving on to our 2 slider pin ports. For each of these caliper slider pin ports, we can carefully remove our slider pin boots by taking hold and rolling it out of place. Once you have it removed, we're going to clean the inside of it and of course make sure it's still soft and pliable, not torn, worn, or damaged. For this, we can just use a clean rag. We're going to lightly twist it, bring it straight on through here, and now we can just roll this around. As you can tell, there's a lot of debris in there. We'll continue on the inside of the slider pin port now. This is leading into the caliper bracket. We have our collection receptacle. We're going to be using parts cleaner and a bore brush. Let's give that a quick rinse. All right, that's one side. Let's move along to the other side of the caliper bracket. Now for this side, I can see that I have a small rubber piece here. This actually is part of my boot, so I cannot remove this. I'm going to go ahead and clean this by carefully spraying a little bit inside here, and I'm going to twist a rag. We'll bring it in and attempt to remove as much debris as possible. Obviously, we're being extremely careful not to cause any damage here. Just work that rag around. And now, of course, we're going to wait for this to dry. After fully cleaning, let's continue on with some high-temperature caliper lubricant. I'm going to start with along each side of the caliper bracket where our caliper bracket tins would be. You don't need very much here, just a thin coating should do. This is going to help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. It's also going to help keep moisture away from this area. Let's continue on with our caliper bracket tins. As far as these caliper bracket tins, you're going to find that you have 2 different types. Some of them will have the locking tabs facing out towards one side, and others will have it on the opposite side. We need to pay attention to those tabs. Aside from that, you can see that I have a small ridged area here. This is going to go down towards what would be the bottom of the caliper bracket, and those tabs that I originally mentioned have to be on the outside of the caliper bracket, not on the inboard side, which might hit up against our brake rotor. We're pressing this in, listening for a click, and double check to make sure it's secured in place. Go ahead and repeat the process for all others. Now we're moving along to our slider pin ports. I'm still using my high temperature lubricant. I'm going to go deep inside this port, make my way all the way out to the outer edge. Once you've applied that lubricant, it's time for our slider pin boot. When we go to install this, we want to make sure we have it in the proper orientation. We have this groove right here that needs to slide into the caliper bracket. Start it in from one angle, and then you're just going to continue on rolling it into the proper position. You can use a small pocket screwdriver if necessary. Just be extremely careful not to damage the boot. We'll just apply a thin amount of lubricant inside of the boot as well for good measure. Now, as we bring the caliper bracket into place, we're going over our brake rotor. The next thing we need to do is take our cleaned mounting bolts. I like to use some red thread locker, and we're going to start each of them in. Once you have both of them started in, we'll bottom them out and then torque them to 98 foot-pounds. You're going to find on your brake pads, you have a small tab which slides down into the groove on your caliper bracket. Let's line this up, press it in. Now, when you do press it in, you should find that the brake pad can still move around. If you have to use a hammer to tap it into position, it's not seated properly. Maybe you didn't clean the bracket well enough. Now it's time to install that caliper. We're taking the caliper and we're sliding it over our brake pads and our caliper slider boots. Now once you have that in position, we're going to continue on with our 2 caliper slider pins. For each of our 2 caliper slider pins, we need to make sure we clean and inspect the smooth shafted area here and also the threaded portion. Now once you have that cleaned, we're continuing on with our high temperature caliper lubricant, and we're lubricating the entire smooth portion. Now I'm going to take the larger of my 2 caliper slider pins and I'm installing it in the upper mounting point. Slide that in as far as possible, start it in by hand. We're leaving this loose, let's do the same for the lower. Once they're both started in, go ahead and snug them up and torque them to 65 foot-pounds. Double check to confirm that's secure and you have not twisted your flex hose in a way that might restrict brake fluid flow. Now let's go ahead and remove our lug nut from this area. One last quick inspection and we can reinstall our wheel. With the wheel in place, start on all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts. Bottom them out. We'll get the wheel safely back down on the ground and torque each of these to 100 foot-pounds. With the wheel back on the ground, we'll be torquing these in a crisscross manner to that 100 foot-pounds. When we install the center cover, we want to make sure that we have the ports for each one of our lug nuts aligned properly. Tap it into position. Double check and confirm it's properly secured. Okay friend, we showed you the installation of the front brakes on one side of the vehicle. The process for one side of the vehicle is the exact same thing as the other. Once you've completed that, you need to make sure you pump up your brake pedal till it's nice and firm, and then take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.